many of you all know what Head Start is, and it is a free early childhood education program that provides childcare, nutritious meals, and support for children in certain low-income households. And it's had as far as I can tell, a decent amount of success. And unfortunately, however, I think it was around last year, there were some cases here in Chicago of Head Start programs that were not providing adequate care to the children. In one case, a child was forgotten on a bus, a school bus, until he ended up with frostbite. Again, never should have happened. This should
Oh my
never have
God.
happened. I mean,
No,
it
of
was
course
awful. However, the response, I guess, was that they started changing the funding system, and the city of Chicago itself still has a certain amount of this federal funding that it can do what it likes with. But then you had different organizations that were actually bidding to get this funding rather than the other funding mechanisms. The idea behind these changes was to create additional accountability. But what's practically happened is that several organizations with high marks, excellent reputations, have lost their funding for Head Start, and they're going to, in some cases, they will not be able to offer the program at all. There's one program in Albany Park where our 99 Perspective studio used to be. That is, it's a very diverse, very multicultural community, and they had interpreters. Excuse me.
bless you.
Thank you. Cat over here. Sometimes a little.
Oh, people were asking in the live chat where your cat is since mine made an appearance.
He is here. He's actually here at my side, but he
Oh,
is.
okay.
You may have seen his.
There
You
he
may have seen his
is.
tail earlier, but he's over there. That's my Ned. But essentially, like this one center, which is going to have to cut its Head Start program entirely. They have Korean and Spanish interpreters in every classroom. So these are communities that are very vulnerable, and so Head Start is quite important. It's become even more important because, first of all, we have a crisis of childcare. We've already had a childcare issue in this country, but now with what's going on with the global health emergency, and people are being expected to go back to work, and some mothers are saying, and parents are saying, we can't go back to work because we have to offer childcare. We have to take care of our kids, and a lot of daycare centers closed down during the lockdowns because they didn't have any clients. So that happens. Now we've got a childcare issue. We've also, in my opinion, have a very serious childhood education problem in this country because a lot of kids, they were taken out of school, the lockdowns. They had teachers who were not prepared to teach online. That we've got right now schools that are closing down and quarantining as soon as they get a case of COVID in the classroom or in the school. So we have a whole group of kids now that are educationally vulnerable. And as I've often said, this is one of those situations. This is a situation where this is a bill that's going to come due in 10 years when you have whole groups of children who may have just dropped out, fallen through the cracks, never returned to school, and are now adults trying to enter the workforce. And so these Head Start programs are absolutely critical. But because of this change in funding, these programs are not getting the funding that they need. And apparently a lot of activists, delegates, some of the school owners themselves, the school managers themselves are saying, look, this is not a transparent process. We don't understand why we're not getting this support. Some are considering going to private donors, but that's its own set of problems because according to individuals who are involved with not-for-profit and donations, a lot of these major foundations, first of all, cannot give the level of support that the government can. And number two, they don't want to be doing that because once private donors take over what they believe is a government function, then the government can just be derelict in its duty and not give the support and withdraw the support entirely, leaving it to the whims of private donors. So I think this is very serious. And it has to be taken in context. This is not just about Head Start funding right now. This is in a context where I believe we're looking at a major educational crisis in this country, and we're not going to see the effects as clearly for a while, because these kids have to become adults first. And
So
we're going to see what happens.
if I'm understanding it correctly, the funding is going to be cut, or it's not going to be it's not going to meet the same funding that it had because we didn't meet up to certain the city didn't meet certain standards.
I believe my understanding of what has happened is that there was a process for giving funding to Head Start programs.
Okay.
Because of some bad actors,
Got it. That's what I
that
thought.
process was changed. But what
So everybody
happened,
suffers then because the funding gets cut.
and some places were able to get the funding, but other organizations that have had an excellent track record got their funding cut. And this, and with no explanation, there's not a lot of transparency as to how any of this happened. And they want this resolved. In the meantime, we've got kids who can't wait. We have kids and families that cannot wait. And in some cases, these local Head Start programs, they're in communities, and we know what Chicago is like. We are a city of neighborhoods, and these neighborhoods have their own cultures. They have linguistic differences, religious and cultural differences. And so even if the kids are able to get a spot at another Head Start, it may not be close to home. It may not be near or around neighbors and friends. And that other Head Start program may not have the cultural or linguistic resources that a program that is rooted in a community might have. And I think that that's very significant.
Well, it looks like the mayor is petitioning the federal government, so I guess this is going to happen at the end of September. There's some time here to see what happens, but yeah, it's very irresponsible for all the reasons that you stated with these neighborhoods, that these kids are going to suffer because of it.
And I think another fear that people have, again, is, okay, if you're going to go to private donors for this, because I can understand that impulse, but first of all, the private donors are not going to be able necessarily to make up the kind of support that you're going to get from the feds. But the other issue here is that there's that real risk of this just being one more responsibility that gets placed in the private sector, which is where you're going to have a lot more kids falling through the cracks, because that's going to be up to the private donors at that point.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is going to be another wait and see situation as far as what happens as the city petitions the federal government to take a second look at this and hopefully not impact these kids who are going to be most at risk.